Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle DataX Unite, Data and Analytics Done Right. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our speakers. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page. To ask questions during the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Without further ado, I'd like to have our speakers introduce themselves. Kieran, can we start with you, please?
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm Kiran Jha, and I work as a solution architect for Boomi. And prior to Boomi, I was working as a resident architect for Informatica, and I've worked on the data governance, privacy, and cataloging space. And I've helped customers from banking, financials, retail, entertainment to build their data governance practice. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Eric, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Eric Barner. I'm one of the sales managers over at Boomi as well. And very often I'm considered one of the go-to data guys. So back when I got started in data, it was a database administrator. I worked on BI different reports from there, and then everything in between across a variety of organizations, always focusing on why the data is important.
Great, thank you. We're excited to have Eric and Kieran with us today for a fireside chat called Getting Your Data Ready to Drive Business Outcomes. So let's begin. And our first set of questions is about data readiness and data silos. Our first question is for Eric, and that is, why is data readiness a challenge to organizations, and do the data silos exist?
Well, Eric, there's no doubt that the data silos are existing. Sometimes this even happens on purpose. Specific lines of business need to be able to segment out their specific data set. Sometimes it's privacy, like not everybody should be able to access or can access HR type information. Very often silos get stood up though, because it's just the easy way to take a copy of a data set and be able to manipulate it for your specific analytic purposes. Going back to the start of the question, the data readiness, really this becomes making sure that you can trust the data. It is the correct data. It is the valid data. And readiness is making sure that you have the understanding of that data, the access to that information, so that way it becomes readily available to the users that need to be able to access it. In the earlier session today, Arnag was talking about how there's the life cycle of data and you're breaking down those individual silos. And really what we're trying to get to is a way to be able to organize that information so that way the analysis on it can be done, whether that is in an AI purpose or traditional BI type reporting.
Great, thank you. Our next question is for Kieran, and that question is, how can an organization overcome the data silo problem?
Sure, as Eric mentioned that data silo is one of the main concerns for most of the organization. So having a robust data governance practice in place will help that. And that'll help most of the organizations to have a consolidation of systems at enterprise level. And also to concern about the centralized enterprise data architecture. That's one thing that all the organizations should go for, because that will help them build a golden record or single source of information for their systems. And everybody who's a consumer of the data, they would know where to go to, and they would know that data is being vetted around and data is trustworthy for their business. And again, having that self-service enablement for most of the organization, that would help all the consumers to use the data with utmost ease.
Great, thank you. We'll cover the golden record in more detail in just a little bit. Next question is for Eric, and that is, what are the benefits when a company moves away from silos?
Well, you start to transform your organization as you move away from the silos and you start to have that layer of kind of consolidated single location of where that information needs to go. So organizations go through transformation stages, and as you're going from siloed data into insights-driven organizations, you start to have a lot more impact on how you're able to actually run your business. A lot of times this really comes down to the efficiency. I am always about efficiency and knowing where your data is, as opposed to going out and trying to ask somebody that has some cardinal knowledge of the data systems. So efficiency of knowing where to go for your data, knowing that your data is trustworthy because you have that data readiness in place, And you're also able to find that trusted information and only access the data that you are supposed to be able to access. So it goes into the data is ready for consumption, it is trustworthy, and I'm able to take actions upon it.
Great, thank you. And the follow-up question is, where does the technology fit in?
So technology is one of those, people like to think that it's a silver bullet, but technology is not a silver bullet for technology's sake. I always talk about the 3 Ps. It's the people, it's the product, and it's the process that is put in place to be able to handle and make an organization be data-driven inside of there. Now, obviously, there is technology that's involved. That is the product component of it. But you need to be able to make sure that you're enabling the people and you're putting the correct processes in place that need to be able to be clearly defined, implemented, and followed by the process or by the people that are interested in having that. So the technology fits in, yes, but it becomes the enabler, not the end all be all for the technology.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little more about data governance. And this next question is for Kieran, and that is, what is data governance?
So data governance is nothing but it's a measure to help data within the organization. So help with availability, usability, integrity, and security of the data. And most of the organization, they have some, especially financials and banking and others that deal with the PII data. They have some internal data standards. They have some policies that need to be followed. There are several federal compliance rules that they need to govern by, like CCPA, GDPR. So having a measurement in place for their data and with all the standards and all the policies that they govern by, and making sure that all the compliance been involved as well as part of their process, end-to-end process. And this is more towards having a trustworthy data set, having access across the enterprise data set, and making sure that the audit audit trail is there so that they would know who all has access to the data, who all is having, who all are manipulating the data, who all are having access to duplicate or to copy the data further, so that they can put those integrity checks in place and make sure that the data is being used as it's authorized to.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Eric, and that is, how does technology play a role in data governance?
Kind of the same idea that we talked about with even the data readiness. The governance needs to be in place, and people need to be able to follow the process. The technology is there to enable that, giving people the correct access to the data, giving people the flag that says, yes, this is my trustworthy data, but also making sure that they understand that data up front. So when you have your data in that ready state, the governance starts to allow the controls for who's able to access it, what they're allowed to do with it, as Kieran had just mentioned, whether they're allowed to manipulate it or whether they're allowed to just view that information or be able to take that data somewhere else. But we also want to be able to provide that, where did the data go? The data lineage concept. So that way, as an organization is becoming data driven, they know where the data ends up across different systems. Again, going back to that first one, the silos, sometimes they're stood up for a very specific purpose. I need to run analytics on this data set and it's not in the format that I need. I need to be able to take that into a better technology, into a different technology fit for purpose. And the governance and the integration capabilities really come into play for how that can happen.
Next question is for Kieran, and that is, why are data governance programs still struggling to be successful?
So there are a few different reasons. The first I would like to point is the 3 Ps which I talked about. So having people, product, and process. Since these are 3 pillars which enables any data governance program. So if any of these pillars fails, it's gonna fail the entire program. One thing is about having data silos that we talked about. So having multiple data silos and having that individual mindset that they would need to have their own data so that they can manipulate it easily. It's something that need to change. So we do have to come up with maybe define process and rules around data and governing it, so that people would know that they cannot have, or they shouldn't have data silos for their own individual units rather than go for an enterprise data architecture. Another thing that we have is people, where the change of mindset is going to take a while. And it's really because enabling data governance is time taking. So having that change in mindset is key. They should know that whatever they are doing is part of a bigger picture, and they would be good with that. And changing that culture and having a way that, even though it's robust, but it's not too cumbersome. So having a defined, easily followed process would help organizations to be more successful in implementing the data governance, along with documentation, of course.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question, what value does a successful data governance program provide?
So it provides a lot of benefits for sure. Tom also discussed in our previous session that the key goal for any organization is to have quick insights of data. And everybody at the leadership position or at any level, they would like to know what the data looks like, or how is it important for them. So a successful data governance implementation will ensure that the data is consistent, it has good quality, it's trustworthy. So you are not spending time digging into the data that you would need. It'll be easily organized, it'll be protected, it'll be secured at the source. So you'll have minimum risk of data breaches, you'll have minimum risk of any penalties from organizations or from government. So you have plenty of benefits from implementing the governance program for sure.
Thank you. So let's move on to the golden record and having one source of truth. Eric, what is a golden record and the value it provides a company?
The single source, there's lots of different names for the golden record, the single source of truth. Some organizations call it True North. Some organizations call it my enterprise data warehouse. Other organizations do call it a golden record. Really what it comes down to is you're looking at multiple systems that can be providing some insight for a particular type. So you can think of this kind of as the nouns of your business is very often the analogy that's used. It's your employees. You want to be able to have a single location for your employee, their name, what bank they're associated with as you start to get into the kind of payroll for that particular employee, what their address is. There's multiple systems that need to be able to utilize this type of information. So a golden record, or that master record, really allows a company to have one location to trust that piece of information, regardless of where that data is actually originating. The advantage to that for what it provides a company is, again, that single location, but then you start to enable, utilizing some of the technology, how you can synchronize these different systems. So an update for my phone number goes to system number one. It now needs to be distributed to 15 other systems maybe. The golden record is, here is what my current phone number is. This is my phone number that I have entered as a person. So allowing that golden record to keep track of all of the different attributes of that now. The customer, the product, the employee, the machines that you even have on a manufacturing floor, all of those become golden record components or golden record possibilities that you want to make sure are provided, consolidated, trusted, and relevant.
So this next question is for Kieran. How does data governance play a role in this?
So as part of data governance, it helps breaking down data silos. So you'll not have, as Eric mentioned, you'll not have 5 different copies of single record. You'll have a centralized data management system, which will cater to all the needs of the enterprise. It will lead to consistency. It will lead to trustworthiness of the data, which is key for any data analytics and specific decisions. Again, the data governance model will enable organizations to create standards and policies, as we talked about, for governing data, and also for implementing and enforcing the procedures. So everybody would know what process to follow through. So there won't be any leak in between the process. They would know the different data mappings that's there, different classification that's in there. You can have business glossaries, data catalog, which will help the entire enterprise level users to follow the same definition of the data, to follow the same process, to cater the data, to collaborate with each other and make sure that there's not multiple copies of the data that exist in there.
Great, thank you. And the next question is, how does a golden record impact data readiness?
So you can't really have golden records without having the data readiness. You need to be able to understand what the data looks like before you can deem that as a golden record or the master record that's coming across. When you're getting into data standardization, understanding how we are representing even just something basic as the state. I live in the state of Texas. Is it TEX dot? Is it TX dot? Is it capital TX or Texas spelled out? All of that comes into play for understanding the data. You want to make sure that the golden records that you have in that centralized location has that standardization across all of the records that are within that particular domain. So you need to have an agreement on the format of the data. You need to have agreement on the attributes in which particular fields you are interested in keeping for there. And also which source becomes the best source. So very often when you're getting into golden records in the data synchronization process, you start to see what we call in the integration space, swivel chair integrations. I need to update my phone number in this system. Well, now I need to go to this system and this system and this system. When we start to have golden records, that starts to act as the hub. I can update it in system number one. System one feeds it to the master data hub. Synchronization takes care to be able to get that information to all of the other systems that are interested or want to be able to receive that particular update. Again, going back to the readiness of that, we're not trying to act purely as transactional systems. Transactionals are very high volume types of information. We're trying to act really as the capability, the functionality of the nouns, those slowly changing dimensions. If you think of kind of the star schema back in the enterprise data warehouse where you have your dimensional tables on the outside that maintain that information. The difference with this is your dimensional tables are really being fed from many different systems. So you want to be able to make sure that all of those systems maintain the same quality of information, the same standard of information, and the same kind of update capabilities for as this system gets updated, what other systems need to be updated downstream from there.
And as a follow-up question, how does the technology fit into this?
So it goes back to those 3 Ps again, the people, the process, and the product that is coming across. And you need to be able to have all 3. As organizations are starting to undertake master data records, there's many, many examples out there of failed master data record implementations that have cost organizations millions of dollars because they think a technology alone is going to be able to solve their problem. When you're getting into master data and you're getting into the capabilities of having that centralized data hub, you really need to be able to have the buy-in from the business all the way up to the top that this is going to be the standard. This is the approach that we are taking to maintain our golden records and our master information. The technology enables that. The change really has to happen with the processes. We can't do point-to-point integrations anymore if we're trying to do master hub synchronization functionality. The people need to be accepting of the changes that are going to take place as well. And the technology is just there to be able to enable it and make it easier for organizations who want to be able to have golden records in that centralized location for their data.
Let's move on and discuss self-service a little bit. Kieran, what are the top business benefits of providing a self-service data environment?
Sure. So in today's world, data is of utmost importance. And the first benefit that we get from enabling users for having self-service data environment is quick turnaround of analytics or data insights, any decisions that they would like to make. And we save a lot of time because now the analysts or stewards, they don't have to go to different admins or different system owners to get the access. They have all the information that they would need readily available, be it the various systems or governing source. They can, again, it changes the mindset because now people know that they don't have to go to different systems or it's not hard for them to get the data. So they can follow the process. That changes their mindset. They can follow the policies, they can follow the process, and they can go to the golden record as we talked about. So source which has a golden record and then fetch it from there. Another thing is it enables users to leverage the data effectively as per their needs. So they can manipulate the data based on their requirement. They can transform, they can load it based on their needs. And also it optimizes the business decision making, which relies more on data analytics. So since you have more data available and it can be manipulated the way you need as per your needs, the business decisions will be more optimized.
Does a company achieve a self-service data environment?
So in a self-service situation, it becomes more important that the data that's available to users is of high quality, because that's the one they're going to work on, and it's up to date and in a format that the users would need and understand. And because of this, the data governance and availability of metadata is important, because users have data resources that they are able to understand easily, they are able to manipulate easily. Also, the organization need to make sure that the data is accurate. So if there is a change in any system, they should make sure that the synchronization happens, as Eric mentioned, that synchronization is key, where they have a single set or single source of information on golden record. And so making sure that data is accurate, is accessible for self-service users, and also to ensure that those users, be it like business analysts, executives, or citizen data scientists, and among others, they don't misuse the data. So having that security in place where they can restrict the data, they can restrict access, so that there won't be maybe copying or compromise of data, which leads to data breaches. So having that security restrictions is also important.
Great, thank you. And what are the obstacles to creating a self-service data environment, and how do you get past them?
So the first thing that we talked about, as Eric also mentioned, that 3 Ps. So that mindset is key. If people are not willing to change or not willing to adapt to the system or to the newly governed process, it's going to fail. So having that data governance and having that change in mindset is important. Another thing is access can't be, having that self-service access, it shouldn't take more than a week or so. It shouldn't even take a couple of days. So getting that access should be quick. So the process needs to be automated so that the user doesn't have to wait for hours and hours or days and days just to get the access to the data. And third point that we talked about is having that security access and striking the balance between wide open and locked down data sets. So.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Eric. What solutions should be in place to support a data self-service environment, and why?
Well, one thing that has to be in place is pervasive connectivity, making sure that you can get access to all of the different systems that are required. The next aspect is making sure that you have a solution around understanding the data readiness aspect that we talked about earlier in this session. So making sure that we're able to connect to the systems, understand the data is in there, and then be able to act upon it. Whether you're doing this from the standpoint of having to call your IT organization, if you have an IT organization that is just waiting for requests to come in and they can handle that very quickly, or you're putting in place the data citizen or the citizen integrator type concept, easy access to that information that you know is trusted. I did just see one of the polling results that came in, and it said quarter of the members saying it's taking too long to get the data into the format and to be able to support the question being asked. So the solutions, whatever solution that is being put in place, needs to be able to act upon the information in a way that you know is trusted and trackable. So a governance solution should not continue a garbage in, garbage out, or any of the other analogies that you want to talk about for pushing some of this dirty data around from system to system. You need that control in place to be able to understand the data and make sure that it is cleansed and appropriately classified for who's allowed to access, and making sure that it's the standards that you're going to be able to define. A lot of people are asking for the information for their analytic purposes, whether it's on BI dashboards or whether it's the citizen integrator who needs to be able to do their own analysis, slight pivots, slight adjoining data sets. So we want to make sure that we're providing easy methods for both IT and the citizen integrator to be able to access that secure information. The last thing to really talk about for what needs to be put in place is human engagement. Not just from the human that is getting involved in building out the integrations, but we want to make sure that as a user is entering some information, they know where to enter that information. It's basic forms that are online. As new information is coming into the applications, making sure that it's validated and checked. If something is completely out of whack with data that's coming in, pause that type of integration and provide an approval type mechanism to be able to say yes or no, allow this data to be able to be acted upon, and then continue downstream on that integration capability.
Great. Thank you both for that insightful chat. Just as a reminder, audience members can still enter questions. And now we're going to take some of the questions from the audience that have come through so far. First question is, prior to data readiness, how can an org better approach data taxonomy from the top?
So there's a couple different ways that we can answer that, because that can be from the top of the organization, or that can be, let's take a holistic approach to the taxonomy of the data across the organization. Organizations really need to be able to have that understanding of the data in a simplified method that is designed for the user. Well, I just went out of focus, didn't I? Allow the users to be able to understand that data taxonomy. So very often that comes into play for, let me understand the overlapping data from one system to another, and allowing organizations to have easy methods of metadata management, consumption of some of that metadata across the systems, but to be able to tie that technical metadata into the business metadata that comes across as well. So having that holistic view of the data in a simplified fashion really becomes important.
Great, thank you. Kieran, what do you think? Do you have anything to add to what Eric's?
Yes. So thanks, Eric, for that. It's very insightful. I would say that having that business glossary, and they want to know how it can help them for data readiness. So having an enterprise level business glossary would help tie this technical information to business information to maybe layman terms where a user is not a business user or a technical user, but they would like to know what these fields meant or how it's being tagged to each other. So having that plain English description would help them to understand as well.
Thank you. The next audience question is, bringing together multiple sales databases is a major problem for my team. Any recommendations?
Kieran, you want to take that one?
Sure. So we have seen it everywhere. So it's almost everyone's problem, be it sales, be it our company. So first issue is to identify different systems. And that's where we talked about data silos, to make sure that we are not replicating the data, we are not replicating or deduplicating it. So making sure that we have one system which follows the entire data set definitions, or they have that master data record or have the golden record, to make sure that all the sales people, they are referring to the data in definitions and data information that's present in there. So having single source of information for different departments, I would say. And then as we talked about having that overlap, if there is overlap of information, if there's system that's deriving their data from maybe upstreams. So having those information tagged along so that there's dependency, there's lineage. And if there is transformation that happens in between, we should tag that as well. And that will help the organization to make sure that they have end-to-end holistic view of the data that flows within their sales department.
Eric, do you have anything to add?
Just a shameless plug, stop by the booth afterwards and we can talk about how Boomi is actually able to help with some of those capabilities as well.
Thank you. So next question is, what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in modernizing their data governance, and how did they get past it? Kieran, that seems like a good question for you.
Yeah, it does. So first most thing I would say is sometimes they rush into it. They just want to implement the data governance for sake of it. So having a better planning about procedures, having policies in place, and knowing what the critical data is, what they are trying to govern, whether if they are financials, if they want to restrict access to their customers or their products, how they would like to go. So it's not just a short-term vision. They would definitely look at of maybe 5-year or 10-year vision about how the data management policy is going to impact the organization, and based on that, they should build on their data governance platform, I would say.
Thank you, Eric. Do you have anything to add to that?
Biggest mistake that I've seen is organizations not wanting to modernize. So they are stuck with where they're at today and they're saying it's good enough. And then they start to get behind on some of the technology that they're utilizing, start to become out of support with some of those individual vendors, and now it's a forced modernization. So just making sure that you are staying current and actually having an approach to how you are going down a modern data governance approach.
Great, thank you. The next question is, are there any new solutions coming down the pike to make data supply chain management easier?
One of the approaches that we've always seen, nobody's asking for less data slower. So everybody is asking for more data faster, and they want it in the format that they actually have. And one of the ways that a lot of organizations are starting to undertake faster data is event-driven architecture. When this happens, here's what else I need to have happen. And when you start to combine that capability with forms and dashboards that can be created in the low-code app dev platforms, that's where we start to see new solutions that don't impact just supply chain management, but it can impact many different organizations and many different lines of business across an enterprise.
Hey, thank you. Karen, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, yeah, stop by the booth. We can.
Fair enough. And the next question is, how can you convince leadership that data governance is critical?
So,
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, as Eric mentioned, that's the biggest issue that he sees with most of the organization, that they don't want to proceed with modernization. So to convince leadership, I would say mostly leadership, they talk about their the organization reputations or financial penalties. So if we see in past, there's big organizations who had millions and billions of penalties just because of data breaches. So we don't want to wait till we get penalized for not having a governance in play or not having an effective governance in play. So we should be, maybe we should be proactive towards having that setup done beforehand so that there won't be any breaches going forward, because that'll cost them their brand name, they'll cost them the credibility that they have. And it's hard to get. So I would say if we talk about that, maybe leadership would definitely understand and realize.
Thank you. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, same. Cost of data breaches, the regulations that are now being put in place for GDPR or CCPA, so any of the data residency or understanding of the data and the privacy rules that are put in place are only going to be enabled when you have a data governance put in place.
So the next question is, does data self-service depend on a certain type or maturity of organization?
I think everybody should be undertaking some kind of data self-service. So small organizations all the way up to large enterprise organizations. Everybody is trying to get to that kind of self-service. I want to be able to handle the data and understand the data on my own. Whether or not it is, again, small mom and pop shop, probably not as much, but when you start to get into the small to medium-sized businesses that are with IT organizations in a handful of people all the way to the large global Fortune 100 organizations that have IT shops that are in the thousands of employees, data self-service does depend on having that consolidation of, I need to be able to understand my data. The size of the organization to me doesn't matter as much. It just becomes the urgency of, do I have another team that I can rely on to get my data, or do I need to do it on my own?
Karen, what do you think? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I just want to add that it's not about the maturity of the organization, it's about what kind of data they are dealing with as well. And based on that, they can go ahead with self-service. It doesn't matter whether they are big or small. They can start small and then go big from there.
The next question is, what do you mean by a citizen integrator?
Very often that's the non-technical person who still needs to work with the data. So a lot of times historically it's been IT that is doing the integrations. It's IT organization or a couple SAP developers that know ABAP coding under the covers in a very technical fashion. They may not understand the use of the data. They may not understand what the data is representing. The citizen integrator concept is allowing non-technical users, non-IT members to be able to work with the data, understand the data, manipulate the data, and move that data around as needed and as allowed with the governance rules put in place.
Thank you. Kieran, do you have anything to add to that? What's
Yeah,
a citizen
so
integrator?
yes, I would like to add that they are, as I mentioned, they are the non-technical, but they should be able to do all the tasks from manipulating the data, transforming it, loading it to wherever they want, and for the analysis as part of the governance. They should be able to do all that steps following maybe a simple training. So they would be the one who's gonna work and integrate different systems based on the business needs.
Great, thank you. The next question is, for online forms, are you recommending SharePoint lists?
I wasn't specifically calling out any technology. SharePoint lists are great for the quick online forms. When we start to get into kind of multi-page and multi-users that need to be involved in that, I would look to other solutions for low-code app dev that would allow online forms to very quickly be created.
Kieran, what do you think?
I go with Eric. Plenty of options.
This next question, I think, is formulated for you. How do you jumpstart your data governance organization?
Okay, so the way I talked about data, so having a bigger vision of what you want to achieve, so whether it's restricting data, making sure that people are effectively working together and collaborating with each other. So having that footprint first would help. And then making sure that based on your data needs, if you have to comply with some regulatory compliance rules, then add those as part of the governance footprint, and then start from there to have different departments to govern to have that data governance in place, having different framework implemented, and then create those policies, rules, tag it with data, having business glossary as we discussed, as a global data taxonomy for organization to follow at enterprise level, and then start implementing it step by step, so that everybody works through the change of mindset, and then they work towards collaborating to make it a successful implementation.
Eric, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to the next question?
No, Kieran hit the nail on the head with that one.
The next question is, do you have any suggestions or tools for how to process images for analysis?
I've always dealt with structured or semi-structured information and gone to a third party for any of the image or kind of unstructured analysis. So I don't have any tool recommendations on that one.
Kieran, how about you? Any tool recommendations?
There are plenty. So, and we don't want to talk specifically about any tool right now, but yeah, please stop by our booth and we'll talk about it. Some of our recommendations.
The next question is, in regards to data governance, what is the best practice for setting that up and enforcing compliance?
Okay. So the best practice I would say is to involve everyone who's responsible for implementing a successful governance. And as Eric also mentioned, that human intervention is key. So you cannot automate everything just to make sure that the thing's gonna flow on its own. We need to have a governing body who looks after what's happening. And there has to be a human intervention where if there is a security access, or if there is a level of maybe data replication that's happening, someone should be there to make sure that it's not gonna happen or it's not gonna go to that level. So involve everyone, every key people or key role player who's gonna be there, and then make sure that they are in agreement and they know what rules, policies to follow.
Thank you. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, just as part of that project plan, that's not going to be something that can be turned around overnight. Making sure that you're documenting all of the processes that are found in, like, really you have to start with one, getting the buy-in and the agreement across the board that this is the direction that we truly want to go. And then making sure that you're doing that introspective of how are things done today. As you're looking at the integrations that are done, as you're starting to look at and uncovering all of those silos that are sitting out there today, it's important to document where and how that's being done in today's state, but where and how that can be done in a governance model. The documentation project planning is always very important as you're undertaking a large transformational project like this.
Thank you. That's just about all the questions we have for today. Do either of you have any final remarks you want to leave the audience with?
Just that data is important. A lot of organizations do talk about, there was a Newsweek article, data is the new oil. And then the analogy that you use is data is the new oil until it starts to catch on fire. So make sure that you are putting the governance, putting the controls, and putting the capabilities that you require as an organization to move forward as an enterprise. And what that requires is that pervasive connectivity, the data readiness, and the human engagement that's required across the board for all of those data initiatives. And thank you for having us, Eric.
Erin, how about you? Any final words for the group?
Yes. So as Eric mentioned, data is oil. So yeah, data is important. It's always been, and in today's world, it's pretty much everywhere that people are talking about. So have those compliance rules in place as we talked about, and make sure that if your leadership doesn't understand, tell them about penalties, and they definitely would follow through. So thanks for having us here.
Thank you both for an insightful chat. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today for this excellent session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thanks very much and have a good day.